The great hall of the Galactic Council stretched out like a small moon. Thousands of different alien species sat in their floating chairs, each one representing worlds that humans had never seen. The air hummed with translation devices, working hard to turn hundreds of languages into something everyone could understand. Ambassador Zextai of the Kron Empire stood up from his seat. He was tall, almost 3 meters, with skin that looked like metal and eyes that glowed red. His voice was deep and rough when he spoke. "Fellow members of the council," he began, his words echoing through the hall. "Today the mighty Kron Empire announces our intention to bring order to a new world. The planet called Earth will join our empire. Its people, these humans, will serve us as they should." A wave of shocked whispers moved through the crowd. Many aliens turned to look at each other with wide eyes. Others just stared at Zextai, like he had lost his mind. Ambassador Veltara of the Archelon Union was the first to stand up. She was old, very old, with a shell-like back and wise eyes that had seen many wars. Her voice was calm but firm. "Ambassador Zextai," she said, "have you lost your minds? Do you have any idea what you are talking about?" Zextai laughed, a sound like metal scraping against stone. "Old Veltara, your age makes you weak and scared. Humans are nothing special. They are young and weak. They only learned to travel between stars 100 years ago. We have been doing this for thousands of years." General Thrak of the Hegemony forces stood up next. He had fought in more wars than most species had even heard of. His scarred face showed his experience. "Kron fool," he growled, "you speak of things you do not understand. We have been watching the humans since they first left their world. There is something different about them." "Different?" Zextai asked with another laugh. "They are soft creatures made of water and meat. Their ships are small. Their weapons are simple. What could be different about them?" Ambassador Queth of the Vorthak, the oldest species in the council, slowly rose from his seat. When he spoke, everyone listened. He had lived for over 1,000 years and had seen empires rise and fall. "Young Kron," he said in a voice like wind through old trees, "in my long life, I have seen many species that looked weak, but were not. The humans, they worry me, not because they are strong, but because they think differently than we do." Zextai waved his hand like he was pushing away a bad smell. "Old fears from old minds. The Kron Empire has conquered 47 star systems. We have never lost a war. These humans will be just another easy victory." "Have you studied them?" asked Dr. Xylith of the Science Collective. Her voice was high and musical. "Have you looked at their history, their wars, the way they solve problems?" "I have seen enough," Zextai replied. "They fight each other over small pieces of land. They use metal weapons and fire. They have no unity. When we arrive, they will surrender quickly." The hall erupted in noise. Hundreds of aliens were talking at once, their voices mixing into a chaos of sound. Some were arguing with the Kron. Others were trying to talk sense into their neighbors. A few species were already making plans to move their trade routes far away from human space. Veltara raised her hand for quiet. When the noise died down, she spoke again. "Zextai, we are trying to save your empire from making a terrible mistake. The humans may look weak, but they have something that scares those of us who are wise enough to pay attention." "And what is that?" Zextai asked with another laugh. "They never give up," said General Thrak quietly. "In all our studies of their history, we have never found a time when humans as a whole accepted defeat. They may lose battles, but they keep fighting until they win the war." "They adapt," added Dr. Xylith, "faster than any species we have ever seen. Give them a problem, and they will find 10 different ways to solve it. Usually in ways no one else would think of." "They sacrifice," said Ambassador Queth sadly. "They will give up their own lives for their species, for their ideas, for their children. They do not think the same way we do about what is acceptable to lose. Zexthai looked around the room and saw worried faces staring back at him. He felt angry that these weak old fools were trying to scare him. "You are all cowards," he said loudly. "The Kron Empire fears nothing. In 6 months, we will present you with a conquered Earth, and these humans will be our slaves. Then you will see how foolish your fears were." "Ambassador Zexthai," Veltara said one last time, "please reconsider. Contact the humans. Try to negotiate. Find another way." "The time for talk is over," Zexthai replied. "The Kron have decided. Earth will fall." He turned and walked out of the hall, his heavy footsteps echoing in the sudden silence. Behind him the other Kron delegates followed, their faces showing the same arrogance as their ambassador. When they were gone, the hall remained quiet for a long moment. Finally, General Thrax spoke. "Should we warn the humans?" he asked. Ambassador Queth shook his ancient head slowly. "The humans will find out soon enough, and when they do," he paused, looking very tired and very sad. "I fear we will all discover what happens when you attack the one species in the galaxy that treats war not as politics, but as survival." As the council members began to leave, many of them were already making secret plans. Some would move their trade routes, others would strengthen their defenses. A few began preparing messages to send to human space, not to warn them, but to make sure that when this was over, humanity would remember who their friends were. In the empty hall, the translation devices slowly powered down, their work done for the day. But the words spoken there would echo across the galaxy very soon. The message reached Earth 3 weeks later. It came through the official diplomatic channels, transmitted from the Galactic Council's neutral station. President Chen sat in her office in Geneva, reading the Kron ultimatum for the 3rd time. The words were simple and clear: surrender or be destroyed. 6 months, she said out loud to her empty office. "They're giving us 6 months to surrender." She pressed a button on her desk. Within seconds, her chief of staff appeared on the screen. "Martha," President Chen said, "activate Protocol 7. Martha's face went pale. Protocol 7 hadn't been used since the day it was created, 50 years ago when humans first learned they weren't alone in the universe. "Are you sure, Madam President?" Martha asked. "Dead sure. Send the activation codes to all colony worlds, all military installations, and all deep space stations. Use the quantum channels. I want every human in the galaxy to get this message in the next hour." "Yes, Madam President." The screen went dark, and President Chen leaned back in her chair. She looked out her window at the peaceful city below. People were walking to work, children were playing in parks, and life was going on as normal. They had no idea that everything was about to change. Far out in space, beyond Neptune, something that looked like an asteroid suddenly came alive. The rock split open like a flower, revealing a massive space station hidden inside. Similar stations activated all across the solar system. They had been built in secret, disguised as mining operations and research posts. On Kepler 442b, humanity's farthest colony, Governor Hassan received the Protocol 7 message while eating breakfast with his family. He kissed his wife and children goodbye, then walked to his office and placed his hand on a scanner that hadn't been used in 20 years. Deep underground, machines that no one knew existed began to hum with power. Captain Torres was commanding a small research ship near the edge of Vega system when her communications officer ran onto the bridge. "Captain," the young man said, breathing hard, "we just received a Priority 1 message from Earth. Protocol 7 is active." Captain Torres felt her blood turn cold. "You're certain?" "Yes, ma'am. Confirmed through quantum channels with full encryption." Torres looked around her bridge. Her crew of 15 scientists and engineers were staring at her, waiting for orders. None of them knew that their peaceful research ship carried enough hidden firepower to destroy a small moon. "All hands, this is the captain," Torres announced over the ship's speakers. "As of this moment, this vessel is no longer a research ship. We are now the UES Retribution, and we have work to do." On Earth, in a bunker beneath the Rocky Mountains, General Morrison watched as holographic displays showed human positions across the galaxy. Each green dot represented a human ship, station, or colony. There were thousands of them, spread across 37 star systems. "Sir," his aide said, "all positions have confirmed receipt of Protocol 7. Sleeper protocols are activating across the board." General Morrison nodded. "How long until we're fully operational?" 6 weeks for full deployment, sir, but we can begin defensive operations in 72 hours. "Good. Signal all colony worlds. Tell them to begin Phase 1 immediately." Across human space, things that had been sleeping began to wake up. Mining ships revealed hidden weapon systems. Civilian transports opened secret compartments filled with military equipment. Space stations that everyone thought were for research suddenly sprouted defensive turrets. But the real surprise was the people themselves. On Mars, factory workers stopped making farming equipment and started making weapons. On Titan, ice miners began producing something that looked like water but could melt through Kron armor. On Europa, the fish farms were converted overnight into facilities that made small, fast attack ships. The transformation wasn't random. Every human settlement had been planned with this day in mind. Every colony had been built with hidden military potential. Every trade route could become a supply line. Every civilian could become a soldier. Dr. Sarah Kim worked at a physics laboratory on Proxima Centauri b. When Protocol 7 activated, she and her team stopped studying particle acceleration and started building the most powerful bomb humans had ever created. They had been preparing the plans for 30 years, just waiting for the right moment. "How long until it's ready?" her assistant asked. 4 months, Dr. Kim replied, not looking up from her work. "Maybe less if we skip safety testing." "Should we skip it?" "Yes," she said, "we skip it." In the asteroid belt, miner Jackson Smith received the Protocol 7 message while eating lunch. He looked around at his crew of 23 people. They'd been mining rocks for 15 years together. Now they had to do something completely different. "Boys," he said, putting down his sandwich, "remember that military training we all had to do when we signed up for this job?" His crew nodded. Every human who wanted to work in space had to complete military training. Most people thought it was just for emergencies, like equipment failures or pirate attacks. "Well," Jackson continued, "turns out it wasn't for pirates after all." 2 weeks later, Jackson's mining ship was patrolling the outer edge of the solar system, armed with weapons that could punch through Kron battleships like they were made of paper. The changes weren't just military. Human society itself began to shift. On Earth, President Chen addressed the world. "My fellow humans," she said, speaking to an audience of 12 billion people, "we are about to face our greatest challenge. An alien empire called the Kron believes we are weak. They think we will surrender without a fight. They are wrong." She paused, looking directly into the camera. "For 50 years, since we first learned we were not alone in the universe, we have been preparing for this moment. Not hoping for it, not wanting it, but preparing for it. Every human colony, every space station, every ship has been built with one goal in mind: to make sure that if someone tries to destroy us, they will regret it forever." Around the galaxy, humans stopped what they were doing and listened. "We will not surrender," President Chen continued. "We will not negotiate. We will not retreat. We will show the galaxy what happens when you threaten the children of Earth." When her speech ended, humanity got to work. Not just soldiers and pilots, but teachers and farmers and engineers and doctors. Everyone had a role to play in what was coming. The Kron thought they were attacking a young, weak species that had barely learned to travel between stars. What they were really attacking was a civilization that had spent 50 years turning every human settlement into a potential fortress, every human into a potential warrior, and every piece of human technology into a potential weapon. In 6 months, the Kron would arrive at Earth expecting to find a planet ready to surrender. Instead, they would find something that had never existed before in galactic history. An entire species that had decided that any enemy foolish enough to attack them would serve as an example to the rest of the universe. Admiral Krexvar of the Kron Third Fleet felt confident as his ships approached the human outer colonies. He commanded 300 warships, the largest fleet the Kron Empire had ever assembled. His ships were armed with the best weapons in the galaxy, and crewed by warriors who had never known defeat. "Sir," his communications officer reported, "we are approaching the Kepler 442 system. Long-range sensors show minimal human defenses, maybe 20 small ships." Admiral Krexvar smiled, showing his sharp metal teeth. 20 ships against 300? This will be over quickly. What Admiral Krexvar didn't know was that those 20 ships had been waiting for him. Captain Sarah Martinez commanded the human defense fleet from her flagship, the UES Defiance. Her ships were small compared to the Kron vessels, but they had been built for one purpose: to hurt the enemy as much as possible before dying. "All ships," Captain Martinez broadcast to her fleet, "you know the plan. Make them pay for every meter of space." The Kron fleet entered the system in perfect formation, their ships lined up like a parade. It was meant to show their power and scare the humans into surrendering. Instead, it made them perfect targets. "Sir," the Kron sensor operator said, "the human ships are not retreating. They're moving toward us." Admiral Krexvar laughed. "Foolish humans. They want to die quickly. Very well. All ships open fire when in range." The Kron ships began firing their energy weapons at long range, bright beams of death streaking across space. But the human ships didn't try to fight back the same way. Instead, they did something the Kron had never seen before. 3 human ships suddenly accelerated to maximum speed, heading straight for the largest Kron battleship. The Kron weapons hit them, tearing holes in their hulls, but the ships didn't stop. They kept coming, even as they started to break apart. "What are they doing?" Admiral Krexvar demanded. He got his answer when the first human ship slammed into his flagship at incredible speed. The impact tore through both ships like they were made of paper. The second ship hit a moment later, followed by the third. When the explosion stopped, the Kron flagship was gone. "Admiral," the communications officer screamed, "the humans just destroyed the Vengeance." But that was only the beginning. The remaining human ships spread out and started using tactics that made no sense to the Kron. Instead of trying to win a normal space battle, they focused on causing as much damage as possible. Human ships would hide behind asteroids, then launch missiles with nuclear warheads. When Kron ships got close, human captains would set their ships to explode, taking their enemies with them. Captain Rodriguez commanded one of the smallest human ships, a converted mining vessel with a crew of only 8 people. When 3 Kron destroyers surrounded his ship, he didn't try to escape. "All hands," he announced to his crew, "it's been an honor serving with you." Rodriguez aimed his ship at the largest Kron destroyer and pushed his engines to maximum. The Kron fired everything they had at him, but it was too late. His ship, loaded with mining explosives, hit the destroyer, and both ships disappeared in a ball of fire. The battle lasted 6 hours. When it was over, the human defense fleet was gone. All 20 ships had been destroyed, along with their crews. But they had taken 57 Kron warships with them, including the fleet flagship. No alien species in galactic history had ever achieved that kind of kill ratio. Admiral Krexvar's second-in-command, Commander Thexel, was now in charge of what remained of the fleet. He stared at the wreckage floating around him and tried to understand what had just happened. "Sir," his tactical officer said quietly, "the humans fought like they were insane. They didn't try to retreat, even when their ships were destroyed. Some of them kept fighting until their ships exploded." Commander Thexel had fought in many battles, but he had never seen anything like this. Most species surrendered when they started losing badly. Others retreated to fight another day. The humans had done neither. They had fought until every single one of them was dead, and they had made sure to take as many Kron with them as possible. "Send a message to command. Tell them the Kepler 442 system is secured, but we took heavy losses." What he didn't mention in his report was the fear he saw in his crew's eyes. Word of the battle spread quickly through the Kron fleet. Soldiers who had been eager for easy victory now wondered what kind of enemy they were really facing. The pattern repeated across human space. At Wolf 359, a single human space station held off a Kron attack fleet for 3 days. When the station finally fell, it took 12 Kron ships with it. The humans had turned their own reactors into bombs and waited until the Kron ships were close enough to be caught in the explosion. At Gliesa 667c, human colonists evacuated their cities and then triggered massive explosions that turned their own planet into a radiation-soaked wasteland. The Kron conquered nothing but poisoned ground that would take centuries to clean up. The worst shock came at Ross 128. The Kron arrived expecting to find a small human research colony. Instead, they found a military base that had been hidden inside what looked like a peaceful science station. The humans had weapons the Kron had never seen before. Railguns that fired metal slugs at incredible speeds, virus bombs that targeted Kron biology, and worst of all, human soldiers who fought in ways that defied understanding. When Kron troops landed on the planet, they expected the humans to fight like other species, from defensive positions, trying to minimize their losses. Instead, human soldiers attacked constantly, using tactics that seemed designed to cause maximum psychological damage. Human snipers would take single shots, then disappear. Human bombs would explode when Kron soldiers thought they were safe. Human fighters would pretend to surrender, then activate hidden weapons when the Kron got close. The Kron commander on Ross 128, General Vexloth, sent a desperate message to Fleet Command. "The humans do not fight to win territory. They fight to kill us. They seem to care more about destroying our forces than protecting their own lives." After 1 month of fighting, the Kron had captured several human colonies, but at a cost that shocked their leadership. They had lost nearly 200 ships and thousands of soldiers. Worse, the human tactics were spreading. Other alien species were watching the battles and learning that the mighty Kron could be hurt. Emperor Krexthul received the battle reports in his palace on the Kron homeworld. He read them twice, not believing what he was seeing. "These losses are unacceptable," he growled to his war council. "How can primitives cause such damage?" "My emperor," his chief admiral said carefully, "the humans fight differently than any species we have encountered. They seem willing to accept any level of casualties as long as they can hurt us." "Then we need to show them the cost of resistance," the emperor declared. "Prepare the 2nd and 3rd armadas. We will attack their homeworld directly. When Earth burns, the other human colonies will surrender." "Are you sure that's wise, my emperor?" the admiral asked. "Perhaps we should negotiate." "Never!" the emperor roared. "The Kron do not negotiate with primitives. Ready the fleets. We attack Earth in 2 months." As the Kron prepared for their final assault, reports of human madness spread throughout the galaxy. Other species began to wonder if they had underestimated these young aliens. Some started making secret plans to stay far away from the coming battle. But deep in human space, in hidden bunkers and secret facilities, something much more dangerous than madness, was preparing to wake up. The Kron thought they had seen the worst of humanity's weapons. They were very, very wrong. Emperor Krexthul stood on the bridge of his personal dreadnought, the Eternal Conquest, watching the largest fleet in Kron history move toward the Sol system. 500 warships, including 12 massive dreadnoughts, and the Emperor himself. This was every major ship the Kron Empire could spare. "My Emperor," Admiral Vakshan reported. "Our scouts confirm that human defensive positions are minimal. A few space stations, some patrol ships, nothing that should trouble us." The Emperor's red eyes glowed with satisfaction. "Excellent. Once we destroy Earth, the other human colonies will see the futility of resistance." What the Emperor didn't know was that human scouts had been watching his fleet since it left Kron space. Every ship movement, every formation change, every tactical decision was being recorded and transmitted back to Sol. In a hidden bunker deep beneath Earth's surface, General Morrison studied the approaching Kron fleet on his holographic display. Around him, dozens of officers worked at stations that connected to every human military asset in the solar system. "Status report," Morrison ordered. "All defensive platforms are online," came the reply. "The asteroid belt fortifications are ready. Mars orbital cannons are charged. All sleeper ships have activated their combat protocols." Morrison nodded grimly. "And the special projects?" he asked. "Project Mjolnir is ready for deployment. Project Prometheus finished testing yesterday. Project Pandora." The officer paused. "General, are we really going to use Pandora?" Morrison looked at the display showing 500 enemy ships approaching his home. "If they want to threaten Earth, they'll learn why that was a mistake. Activate all projects." Across the solar system, things that had been hidden for 50 years revealed themselves. Asteroids split open to reveal massive weapons platforms. Space stations that looked like civilian research facilities suddenly bristled with missile launchers. Even the moon opened up, showing gun batteries that could destroy battleships. But the real surprise was the ships. The Kron had detected about 30 human vessels in the Sol system. What they hadn't detected were the 300 ships hiding in the asteroid belt, powered down and waiting. These weren't the small vessels the Kron had fought at the colonies. These were warships, built in secret shipyards and armed with weapons designed specifically to kill Kron. Captain Lisa Park commanded the UES Vengeance, humanity's newest and most deadly warship. Her ship was smaller than a Kron dreadnought, but it carried something no other species had ever built. A weapon that could tear holes in space itself. "All ships," came the order from Fleet Command. "The Kron are entering the outer system. Begin Phase 1. The first sign that something was wrong came when the Kron fleet passed Neptune. Sensors detected what looked like a small research station orbiting the planet. Admiral Vakshan ordered a single destroyer to investigate. The destroyer never reported back. Instead, the research station revealed itself as a weapons platform that fired projectiles at near-light speed. The Kron destroyer was torn apart so quickly that it simply disappeared. "What happened to the Seeker?" the Emperor demanded. "Unknown, my Emperor. It just stopped existing." More surprises followed. As the Kron fleet moved inward, they found that every planet, every moon, every large asteroid had been turned into a fortress. Jupiter's moons launched swarms of missiles that moved faster than anything the Kron had seen. Saturn's rings turned out to be hiding thousands of small attack ships, but the worst shock came when they reached the asteroid belt. "Sir," the Kron sensor operator said, his voice shaking, "I'm detecting massive energy signatures throughout the asteroid field. It's like the rocks themselves are powering up." Emperor Krexthul watched in disbelief as hundreds of asteroids revealed themselves to be hollow shells hiding human warships and weapons platforms. The asteroid belt had become the largest military installation in galactic history. "Impossible," he whispered. "How did they hide all of this?" Admiral Vakshan was asking himself the same question when the human attack began. The asteroid belt erupted with weapon fire. Beams of energy that could slice through Kron armor, missiles that could track targets across millions of kilometers, and strangest of all, projectiles that seemed to bend space around them. The lead Kron ships were destroyed so quickly that the rest of the fleet had no time to react. In the first 30 seconds of battle, humanity destroyed 50 Kron vessels without losing a single ship. "All ships, return fire," the Emperor screamed. The Kron fleet began shooting back, but their enemies were everywhere and nowhere. Human ships would appear from behind asteroids, fire devastating salvos, then disappear again. The humans weren't fighting a traditional space battle. They were fighting like hunters stalking prey. Captain Park's ship, the Vengeance, targeted the largest Kron dreadnought and fired its special weapon. Space itself seemed to twist around the projectile as it traveled toward its target. When it hit, the dreadnought didn't just explode, it folded in on itself and disappeared. "What kind of weapon was that?" Admiral Vakshan demanded. His science officer's voice was filled with terror. "Sir, I think they just weaponized a black hole." The battle continued for hours, but it wasn't really a battle. It was a slaughter. The Kron had superior numbers, but the humans had turned their entire solar system into a weapon. Every piece of space debris became a projectile. Every planet became a gun platform. Even the sun itself was being used, as human ships fired solar collection arrays that concentrated stellar energy into death rays. What horrified the Kron most was how the humans fought. When a human ship was badly damaged, its crew didn't try to escape. Instead, they would accelerate toward the nearest Kron vessel and detonate their reactor. Human fighters would continue attacking even when their ships were falling apart around them. One Kron captain watched a human ship lose its entire front section to weapon fire. The human crew, now exposed to hard vacuum, kept manning their weapons and firing at Kron ships until they died from lack of air. "They're insane," the Kron captain whispered. "They fight like demons." But the humans weren't insane. They were desperate, and they had prepared for 50 years for this moment. Every human in the solar system knew that if they lost this battle, their species would be enslaved or extinct. So they fought with everything they had. The turning point came when Emperor Krexthul himself was forced to retreat. His personal dreadnought, the pride of the Kron fleet, was being hunted by a pack of human ships that moved like wolves. They had already crippled 2 of his escort vessels and were closing in for the kill. "My Emperor," Admiral Vakshan said urgently, "we must withdraw. We've lost over half the fleet." The Emperor looked at his tactical display, showing the wreckage of hundreds of Kron ships floating among the asteroids. The humans had lost ships too, but nowhere near as many. Worse, more human vessels kept appearing from hidden bases throughout the system. "Retreat," he said quietly, then louder, "All ships, retreat." The surviving Kron fleet fled the Sol system, leaving behind nearly 300 destroyed warships and thousands of dead soldiers. The greatest military force in Kron history had been beaten by humans who had turned their entire solar system into a weapon. As the enemy ships disappeared into hyperspace, General Morrison allowed himself a small smile. But he knew this wasn't over. The Kron would be back with reinforcements, and next time they would know what to expect. "Status report," he ordered. "We lost 47 ships and 6 major installations," came the reply. "Casualty reports are still coming in, but it looks like about 12,000 dead." Morrison nodded. 12,000 humans had died to protect their world, but they had saved Earth and shown the galaxy that humanity was not defenseless. What about our special projects? Mjolnir worked perfectly. Prometheus exceeded expectations. Pandora. The officer paused. Sir, we never had to use Pandora. Good, Morrison said. Save it for next time. Across the galaxy, news of the Kron defeat spread like wildfire. The greatest military empire in known space had been crushed by a species that most aliens considered young and weak. Emergency sessions were called in the Galactic Council. Trade routes were adjusted to avoid Kron space. Some species began making overtures to humanity, wanting to be on the winning side. But in the deepest bunkers of Earth, humanity was already planning for what came next. They had won this battle, but they knew the war was far from over. The Kron would want revenge, and they might bring allies. That was fine with humanity. They had been preparing for 50 years for one war. The emergency session of the Galactic Council was unlike anything in recorded history. Representatives from over 200 species filled the Great Hall, their voices mixing into a chaos of fear, anger, and confusion. At the center of it all sat the few surviving Kron officials, their arrogant expressions replaced by haunted stares. Ambassador Veltara of the Archelon Union called for order. Her ancient voice carried across the chamber, demanding attention from species that had existed for millennia. We are here, she announced, to hear testimony about what happened in the Sol system. The Kron Empire has suffered what appears to be a total military defeat. We need to understand how this is possible. Emperor Krexthul was no longer present. His body had been found in the wreckage of his flagship, along with most of his command staff. The acting Kron representative was Admiral Thekmor, one of the few senior officers to survive the battle. Admiral Thekmor stood slowly, his metal skin scarred, and his red eyes dim. When he spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. Honored Council, he began. I commanded the Kron 4th Battle Group during the assault on Earth. What I witnessed there, what the humans did, it defies everything we thought we knew about warfare. The hall fell silent. Even species that had never liked the Kron leaned forward to listen. The humans had turned their entire solar system into a weapon, Thekmor continued. Every asteroid, every moon, every piece of space debris was either a gun platform or a ship in disguise. But that wasn't the worst part. He paused, his hands shaking as he remembered. The worst part was how they fought. They didn't fight to win territory or capture resources. They fought to make sure we could never threaten them again. I watched human soldiers continue fighting even when their ships had no air left. I saw them ram our dreadnoughts with cargo vessels. I witnessed them detonate their own space stations just to take out our ships. Dr. Xyleth of the Science Collective asked quietly, what was their casualty acceptance rate? There was no rate, Thekmor replied. They acted like every single human was expendable as long as they could hurt us. We destroyed entire human installations, and instead of surrendering, they would turn their reactors into bombs and take our ships with them. General Thrak of the Hegemony forces, who had tried to warn the Kron months ago, shook his scarred head. How many ships did you lose? 437, Thekmor answered, out of 500. A wave of shocked gasps moved through the assembly. The largest fleet in galactic history had been almost completely destroyed. But that's not the most terrifying part, Thekmor continued. The most terrifying part is that they were holding back. What do you mean? Ambassador Veltara asked. Our intelligence officers analyzed the human weapons. Many of them were clearly experimental, like they had been saving them for this exact moment. But in the final hours of the battle, our sensors detected energy readings that suggest they had even more powerful weapons they never used. Commander Kexal, another Kron survivor, stood up. I was present when we intercepted human communications during the battle. One of their commanders reported that something called Project Pandora was ready for deployment, but they decided not to use it. What is Project Pandora? Dr. Xyleth asked. We don't know, Commander Quetzal replied, but the energy signature suggested it was powerful enough to destroy entire planets. The hall erupted in worried chatter. The idea that humans had weapons capable of destroying planets, but chose not to use them, was somehow more frightening than if they had actually used them. Ambassador Queth of the Vorthak, the oldest being in the council, slowly rose from his seat. At over 1,000 years old, he had seen the rise and fall of dozens of galactic empires. I have a question for our Kron friends, he said in his ancient wind-like voice. During this battle, did any human ship or station attempt to surrender? The surviving Kron officers looked at each other. Finally, Admiral Feckmore answered. No, not one. Even when their positions were hopeless, even when they were outnumbered 100 to 1, they kept fighting. Some human ships continued attacking us while they were exploding. And did any human colony attempt to negotiate after your initial victories? No, came the quiet reply. They evacuated their civilians, then turned their cities into trap zones. When we landed troops, we found entire planets rigged to explode. Ambassador Queth nodded slowly. Then you have learned what we tried to tell you months ago. Humans do not think like we do. They do not fight wars to gain advantage or to force negotiations. They fight wars to make sure their enemies can never threaten them again. The ancient alien looked around the chamber, his old eyes taking in the frightened faces of representatives from hundreds of worlds. What you have witnessed, Queth continued, is what happens when you attack a species that has spent 50 years preparing for the possibility that someone might try to destroy them. Every human colony, every human ship, every piece of human technology was designed with one purpose: to make any aggressor regret their decision. Dr. Xyleth asked the question that everyone was thinking. Are the humans a threat to the rest of us now? Before anyone could answer, the chamber doors opened. A single figure walked in, wearing the simple blue uniform of Earth's diplomatic corps. It was Ambassador Sarah Chen, President Chen's daughter, and the first human to address the Galactic Council. The hall fell completely silent as she walked to the center of the chamber. Her presence was somehow both calming and terrifying. She looked young and harmless, but everyone knew she represented the species that had just destroyed the most powerful fleet in the galaxy. Honored representatives, Ambassador Chen said, her voice clear and strong. I come before you today not as a conqueror, but as someone who wants to prevent future tragedies. She looked directly at the surviving Kron officers. The Kron Empire chose to attack my people because they thought we were weak. They thought we would surrender without a fight. They were wrong, and the result is that thousands of soldiers on both sides are now dead. She turned to address the full assembly. Humanity does not want to be your enemy. We want to trade with you, learn from you, and explore the galaxy together. But let me be very clear about something. What happened in the Sol system will happen to any species that threatens Earth or human colonies. The chamber remained silent as she continued. We are not aggressive by nature, but we are absolutely ruthless when it comes to protecting our people. Every human settlement is prepared to fight. Every human ship can become a weapon. Every human citizen has been trained to resist invasion. Ambassador Chen paused, letting her words sink in. The Kron learned this lesson at the cost of their entire fleet. I hope no other species needs to learn it the same way. She turned to leave, then stopped and looked back at the assembly. One more thing. There are rumors that humanity has weapons we didn't use in this conflict. Those rumors are true. We held back because we wanted to send a message, not commit genocide. But if anyone else decides to test us, she shrugged. Well, next time we might not be so restrained. After she left, the hall remained silent for long minutes. Finally, Ambassador Veltara spoke. I motion that we immediately establish the Terra Accords, she said, a galaxy-wide agreement that Earth and all human colonies are permanently off-limits for military action. Seconded, said General Thrak immediately. Thirded, added Dr. Xylith. Within an hour, every species in the Council had signed the agreement. Earth and human space were declared neutral territory, not out of respect for human rights, but out of terror of what humanity might do if fully provoked. The Kron Empire collapsed within 6 months. Their surviving colonies either declared independence or were absorbed by neighboring powers. The Emperor's throne world became a memorial to the folly of underestimating humanity. And throughout the galaxy, a new phrase entered the languages of hundreds of species. Never attack Earth. Parents would tell it to their children as a warning. Military academies would teach it as a fundamental rule of warfare. Diplomats would whisper it when tensions rose too high. Humanity had asked for peace, but when war was forced upon them, they had fought with such terrible efficiency that the galaxy itself changed. The human colonies thrived, protected by the knowledge that any aggressor would face not just Earth's military, but the righteous fury of an entire species that had decided long ago that they would never again be victims. In the end, the Kron's greatest mistake wasn't attacking humanity. It was giving humanity a chance to show the galaxy what they were capable of when pushed too far. The lesson was learned, and it was never forgotten. Earth remained peaceful, but now the peace was enforced by something more powerful than any weapon, the absolute certainty that attacking humanity was suicide.